Good afternoon and or good evening to some of you. My name is Art Shed, and it's time for the show. Let's be reasonable. Remember, folks, this is a show about politics and news. It's the weekend, so we talk about the top 5 news stories of the week. This week does not disappoint, but let's be sure that we understand the purpose of this show. This show is dedicated to common people. This show is dedicated to those people who are average, just like me. I'm just an average guy, just like most of you. This show is dedicated to people who have a dedication to being reasonable and finding objective opinions or solutions to some of the problems that we do have in this great country, the United States. So, guess what, folks? All that being said, let us jump into the top 5 news stories of the week. And of course, in the number 5 spot, we got to talk about Donald Trump and the great state of Colorado. The judge says this case is moving forward. The Citizens for Responsibility and Ethics are bringing a case, a 14th Amendment case, in order to make the case that Trump should be removed from running in the primary and the general election next year. So they want to remove him from the ballot. If they are successful, it's kind of hard for the president or ex-president to get to 270 without having one state, right? Maybe not that difficult. But what happens if you have other blue states that lock onto this particular case and decide to kick him off the ballot in those states? So states like California, states like Pennsylvania, states like New York, what if he's kept off of the ballot? It creates a lot of difficulty, especially in securing the 270 votes that are needed by the Electoral College in order to become president of the United States. So this case is moving forward. The judge said that she's going to hear this case next week, and after which she's going to render her decision. Now, if the Citizens for Responsibility and Ethics are successful, this case will be appealed. It will go to the state Supreme Court, right? And if it makes it out of there one way or another, it will make its way into the circuit court, and then one way or another, for him or against him, this case makes its way to the Supreme Court. And at that point, the Supreme Court has some decisions to make, because remember, this Supreme Court generally lands on the side of states' rights. They just did when we were talking about the issue of abortion, right? They decided to throw that back to the states and let the states make their own decision. Why would this case be any different, you may say, or may add, right? So we will find out if they use the same stance. And if they do, then the ex-president could be removed from the ballot in several different states. Again, making it very tough to get to 270 if that is the express goal, by the Electoral College. You got to have 270 votes in order to secure the office of the presidency. So we'll see what happens. Most of the discourse is trying to understand what the 14th Amendment actually says. So let's look at it and let's read it and see what you think. Give me your opinion. But this is what it says. No person shall be a senator or a representative in Congress or elector of president, vice president, or hold any office, civil or military, under the United States or under any state, who have previously taken the oath as a member of Congress or as an officer of the United States or as a member of any state legislature or as an executive or a judicial officer of any state, to support the Constitution of the United States, shall have been engaged in an insurrection or rebellion against the same, or given aid or comfort to the enemies thereof. But Congress may, by a vote of 2/3 of each house, remove such disability. Now, how do you read that? Can they remove the state, or can they remove a person from the ballot because they are thought to have engaged in insurrection or rebellion? And does it mean a person must be convicted of such a crime to be removed from the ballot? That part is what we're going to test next week. And this is going to be a very interesting case. Now, there's no language. If you look at the language, there's no language in here that says that a person can't run for president or that you must be convicted. Right? They're just saying that you can't. and it's subjective. I think in what they're saying is very subjective, which some people will look at and say, well, that looks kind of political, but it's subjective in nature. So it's going to be interesting to see how this particular piece in the 14th Amendment turns out. What will be well, it won't be the founders. What was Congress's thought process when they created the 14th Amendment? That will be probably on display and will be argued in the courts in Colorado, and as it makes its way to the Supreme Court. This is going to be a very interesting case. A very interesting case. And I'm going to tell everybody, hey, keep your eye on this one, because this one, I believe, if it gets some traction, it's going to make a ton of noise. So what do you think? Can the president or ex-president be stopped from running for office? I'm not asking you how you feel. I'm asking you to make a legal, rational decision about this one, because anybody could have a feeling, oh, they're not being fair to him. This isn't about being fair. This is what's law, what's legal, and what are there any other laws surrounding the 14th Amendment, or is there any precedent around the 14th Amendment removing people from office? Now, there is a case that was recently heard in 2021, 2022. State, I think it was a county commissioner. Yeah, it was a county commissioner in New Mexico. He was removed from office or banned from running for office because of his participation in the Jan 6 insurrection. That's right. I called it an insurrection because I believe, it's my opinion, that the people who were there were brought there by the president, Rudy Giuliani, and a few other people under a false narrative. And I say it's a false narrative because it was never a claim that they were able to prove that the election had been stolen. So it's my contention that they got out in front of their skis on this one because they had no supporting information. And if you don't have any supporting information, everything that you're doing to this point is insurrection, in my opinion. How do you feel about that? We'll see how this case turns out. Give me your opinion, because I could be looking at this totally wrong, but I'm a rational individual. If I am presented some rational discourse to the contrary, I may latch onto that, or I may double down and find something else to support my opinion. So it's up to you. It's up to me. Let's be rational, even in this story. Can Donald Trump be removed from the ballot in 2024 because of his insurrection in 2020? That's the question. We'll know part of that answer over the next couple of weeks, right? So let's stay tuned. That's the number 5 story, on our way to the number 1 story of the week. But before we get there, on to number 4. In the number 4 spot, let's talk about the Maine shooter. In the great state of Maine, one Richard Card, a suspect, shot and killed 18 people, wounding another 13. This tragically came to an end last evening, or this morning. This is Saturday, where the suspect was found with a single gunshot wound. Right. So here we are again, people. This is we're over 500, and according to the stat and stat watchers, it looks like we're on our way to 700 mass shootings in the United States this year. So on pace to break, I think, the record in 2021. So that being said, same old arguments, right? The powers that be, and remember, a lot of these states are Republican leaning legislative bodies, and you have Republicans in control of the House of Representatives, and narrow majorities when it comes to control in the U.S. Senate, held by Democrats. But guess what? I mean, my point is this: Republicans are never going to do anything about this particular issue. Not going to happen. Right. So, and the reason why it's not going to happen is because there's just not enough people dying yet. And it's not them in particular. So since that's the case, they're not going to do anything about this story. and they're not going to do anything about the issue at all. So, according to them, everyone has a Second Amendment right to protect themselves, right? Um, and there are a lot of mentally disturbed individuals in the United States. And that's probably another conversation that we could have. But it comes down to this that, again, there are a ton of mentally disturbed individuals in the United States. I don't want to break them down by race, but I think the statistics kind of show you some interesting things. But then, again, just points to the fact that there's a lot of people that need help and they're not receiving it. And we allow these people to carry firearms and go on shooting sprees when they have a mental psychotic break or whatever the case may be. So Democrats will indicate that they would like to have some form of gun control, and Republicans will poo-poo the ideal of stripping legal, law-abiding Americans from their firearms. And there's an argument to be had here and thought about when you think about, well, this particular gentleman in particular. I mean, Richard Karp, did he have a record? He was a legal, law-abiding individual with a mental disorder that is allowed to carry firearms and allowed to kill 18 people and injure another 13. So I don't see this issue going away in the United States because there is no political will on the Republican side other than to say that everybody has a right to bear arms. And supposedly this right to bear arms is to protect the law-abiding individuals, but it's law-abiding people that end up getting shot. So I wish I had something more or something reasonable to say about this. And I don't know, is there a reasonable solution to this issue in this country? Is taking AR-15s and other assault style weapons off the street, is that a reasonable solution today? I don't, you know what? I'm going to say I don't think so. But because I'm going to tell you that the root of this is the mental issue. And some states have red flag laws. There are other mechanisms that they try to use in order to keep mentally ill people from obtaining or having or keeping firearms. But for the most part, it's kind of like it's open season on the average U.S. citizen today, law abiding or not. And there's, like I said, there's no, this is just going to go this way until Republicans get tired of it, right? Because I believe they kind of hold all the keys to the kingdom on this one. And ultimately, I hold them ultimately responsible for this. I mean, and rightfully or wrongly, they're the party that can't propose any type of legislation to curb gun violence in the United States. I can't say that what Democrats are proposing will work. However, I can look back logically and reasonably look back and look over the 20-year period where there was some legislation in place to keep assault weapons out of the hands of people, right? Can't say that it really did, but gun violence was definitely a whole lot lower then than it is now. Of course, we're a different population today than we were then, right? So it's really strange to me that we end in this place, and this will happen. Several more times this year, and it will be ignored by the Republican Party. We know that. So I would just say, everybody out there, just be careful. Keep your head on a swivel, because you never know who will be the next person to go off and start shooting up everybody. I'm not saying you shouldn't arm yourself. I arm myself. So, I mean, it's the number 4 story. Nothing will happen. There will be thoughts and prayers, but that's about it. And what else is there to say on this topic? There's nothing else to be said. We're just going to continue down this road until the bodies just continue to further stack up. They're not going to do anything about it. I mean, there are more guns in this country than there are people. So don't anticipate there being any action on this. Anticipate that Democrats will propose what they generally propose, right? And it will be poo-poo, just like it normally is every time it's proposed. And you'll have Republicans out there who will say silly things like they have already. But at the end of the day, we'll end up right back here reporting, on another story similar sometime over the next few days, over the next few weeks, right? And hopefully we don't get to 700, but it seems like we're on pace to have over 700 mass shootings in this country. And that's because no one here has the political will to really deal with the crisis reasonably. That's what it comes down to. So that's the number 4 story. More gun violence, right? And we talked about the number 5 story, right? Donald Trump and the state of Colorado. In the number 3 spot, is Bidenomics working? Well, we got some more indicated information that we could look at today. So, on Thursday this week, we saw GDP come in at 4.9%. Remember the setup. The setup is this. I have a set of indicators that I look at that tell me how is the economy doing, right? And I look at these indicators and I invite you guys to look at them too. From these indicators, I make my decisions, how it is that I feel about the economy based on the factual information, not how it is that I feel personally, but based on the factual information. I let the facts determine what it is that I feel. So when I say that, we got 2 numbers released this week. That was the GDP, which came in at 4.9%. And then we also got the Michigan survey that came in above expectation at 68. Most estimates were coming in at 65. I can tell you a little bit later as to what 68 and 65 means, but for the sake of this conversation, we look at these 2 numbers in the backdrop of a month where we saw 336,000 jobs created. We saw inflation tick down, right? When we saw or now we see the GDP number come in at 4.9%. And remember, for this size economy, right, we should be looking at somewhere between 1.5% to maybe 3%. So the fact that we're at 4.9% says, boy, this economy is it's got some pent up steam in it, right? So, and we know that we're headed toward the Fed meeting come next week. I think they meet next Thursday, in which we will know whether the Fed decides to up interest rates some more or whether they decided to kind of hold and see how the economy acts. Now, the fact that we're at 336,000 jobs and the fact that the GDP came in at 4.9%, I have a sneaky suspicion that the Fed will probably raise rates once again, maybe a quarter point, or it may be as much as a half point. Right. So that being the case, it means interest rates for homeowners, who are people who are buying homes, will get a little bit higher. Interest rates for everything will get a little bit higher. Now, in this quest to getting back to some reasonable amount of inflation, which is somewhere around 2%. We're about 4.2% on our way, down to that 2% number. It's going to be hard. I said this before. Between these 2 numbers, 4 and 2, it's going to be hard to get to 2. And the reason why it's going to be hard, I believe, and I hope I'm being reasonable in saying that, the reasonable reason I give for it being difficult is because of those Trump tariffs on those Chinese goods coming in from China, right? So remember, those goods that are coming, imports that are coming from China, we tacked on a 25% or 20, I think it was like 25 basis points tariffs on these goods. America is a flush with Chinese low-cost goods. So that will show up in the cost of these goods making their ways to the U.S. shelves, right? And that these goods are found in Walmart. They're found in your Macy's. They're found in your Dollar General. They're found in your Family Dollar. They're everywhere. So when you drive up the cost of those particular goods, well, it makes it difficult in order to get back to that 2% target without looking at interest rates. And interest rates, if they raise them now, interest rates could go higher. Interest rates could be around 9% or 10%. And we haven't seen those numbers since the 1970s. So, all in all, can I say Bidenomics is working? It's still too early to tell. However, I can say this, it hasn't blown up anything yet. All right, that's the number 3 story. On down to the number 2 story. We got to talk about Trump and all of his legal issues. So in the number 2 spot, Donald Trump. Legal problems everywhere, right? So down in the state of Georgia, in Atlanta in particular, we got Jenna Ellis. Jenna Ellis is the latest to flip on Donald Trump. And you got to say that she probably flipped on Donald Trump because she found out that he was not going to be paying for her legal services, right? So she goes from the day where she went down for indictment and was smiling for the camera to the appeal that you see in front of us now. Now she's appealing to the people and apologizing to the people in Georgia for this fake electorate scheme, right? And for this fake notion that the election had been stolen, right? And they had no evidence whatsoever to support that the election had been stolen, but they went ahead on anyway and set up all of these different things, put all these different pieces in place in order to hijack the federal process. so again, they got out in front of their skis, and there's a state case in Georgia that's happening that I think ultimately at the end of the day, as these people flip, I got to tell you, there's going to be at the end of the day, what is it? It's Eastman, it's Rudy, and there's another attorney up there. I can't remember who the other guy is. Clark? I think it's Jeffrey Clark. Yeah, Jeffrey Clark and the president or the ex-president, Donald Trump. Those 4 guys, there will not be an immunity deal for them because those 4 individuals will be seen as the architects of all of this stuff that took place. The Jan 6, all of the legal cases that were brought, some 60 cases that were brought that were ultimately dismissed. And in certain cases, some of these cases made their way to the Supreme Court, in which the Supreme Court said, nah, bro, not happening, right? So they're in trouble. In Atlanta, another person flips. I figured, well, 19 of them, we got about, what is that, about 13 more people to go? Yeah, 5 people. We got about 12 more people to go. And once those immunity deals are done, those 4 that are left, and again, Eastman, Clark, Rudy Giuliani, and Trump, those 4 guys, they're going to go forward, and all that information and evidence is going to be stacked against them. Those 4 are going to jail for racketeering, and it may not be for 13 counts, right? It may be for 7 counts. It may be for 5 counts, right? But at the end of the day, doesn't bode well for them. Right. So that's in Georgia. And remember, there were the civil case in New York saw Michael Cohen on the stand this past week. He gave his rendition as to how do you view Donald Trump and how do they view asset, how do they view their assets. The Trump organization viewed assets and viewed the tax picture. That's going forward. And that didn't look well. They tried to dismiss that case. Trump stormed out of the courtroom because he didn't like the fact that the judge wouldn't even consider dismissing the case. The judge said, absolutely not. This case is going to continue. Trump also got put on the stand because he was standing out there spouting off about the judge's staff, and he got on the stand. And I'm surprised. I mean, the judge put him on the stand because he wanted to know if Trump was going to lie about it, bold-faced lie about it. And Trump did, right? But he's trying to He's trying to make Trump an example here because he gave him a $10,000 fine and told him the next time he does this, the penalty will be severe. I think he's trying to tell Donald, hey man, if you keep this up, I'm locking you up. And so it'd be interesting to see if Donald Trump goes to jail and pays a fine for violating the judge's request. So we shall see. What else did Donald Trump do this week? I mean, Jan 6, the Jack Smith wants the gag order put back in place because he believes that Trump is trying to intimidate some of the witnesses in the Jan 6 case and also in the Mar-a-Lago case. You had my man, Mark Meadows, according to ABC. Mark Meadows gets immunity for his testimony in the Jan 6 case. That's not good for Donald Trump. That is not good because remember, it's the goal of the prosecutors to get to the people who are in the room where it happens. Remember in the room where it happens, the room where it happens, the room where it happens. That's what they want. And Mark Meadows is in that room. Rudy Giuliani is in that room. The president or ex-president is in that room. They want to know what these people knew at that particular time. They're going to tell the American people what they knew. And at the end of the day, I mean, the Mar-a-Lago case is a documents case. That's an easy case to make, I believe. So Trump ends up in trouble on that one. Does he go to jail? I don't know. Maybe. He's probably the Jan 6 case and the insurrection. If Mark Meadows is the witness for the prosecution, again, Trump is in trouble, people. He is in major trouble. And he would need to win the election in 2024 in order to stave off going to jail or going to prison, right? Can you imagine? He gets 6 years for the Jan 6 case. And can you imagine if he gets another 5 years for Mar-a-Lago? And maybe like 7 years because of Atlanta or what's going on in Georgia. All of these cases, man, there's no way in the world. I mean, there's just no way in the world that you can successfully get around 91 different counts. And what is it? 4 or 5 indictments. It's just, that's a hard sea to navigate. But guess what? He's going to try. But I got to tell you, I've said this before. I believe that this will be something. I mean, if it were you or I, think about it. How bad would this situation be weighing on your conscience, right? It'd be weighing on me, man. That's going to do something to him mentally. I got to tell you. And if you listen to him closely over the past few weeks or so, he sounds kind of crazy. I mean, saying stuff like Joe Biden was responsible for World War II and he ran against President Obama and all of these different things that he's saying at these rallies that he's having. He doesn't sound like, he's a man that's in control or in touch with all of his faculties. You could look at Joe Biden and say that guy is old, right? And maybe this guy needs a nap every several times during the day. But Donald Trump is just as old. So for anybody on the Republican side looking at him like he's your savior, please, there is no way that guy is your savior. In my estimation, I think your savior is really Nikki Haley. And we'll see how that turns out come January, February, and in the early parts of the 2024. If you guys are smart, you're looking at Nikki Haley too. So all that being said, that's the number 2 story on our way to the top story of the day. That puts us in the number 1 spot. And of course, the number 1 story of the week must be Mr. Speaker Mike Johnson in the House of Representatives. We have a speaker, ladies and gentlemen. We started with Steve Scalise, right? He bowed out before he even got a vote. Then we went to Jim Jordan. Jim Jordan had 3 different votes. And on 3 different occasions, he went the wrong way. He needed 217. He ended in his last vote at 195. Then we had Tom Emmer. too moderate, too liberal for the MAGA wing of the Republican Party. So he decides not to even run. He gets out after being nominated. We ended up with Mike Johnson from the great state of Louisiana. He's been in Congress since 2015. There's not much known about Mike Johnson. However, there are plenty of, I guess you would say, papers, different things that he's authored, different decisions that will say, yeah, guess what? This guy is a conservative, probably ultra conservative, probably in the MAGA camp, right? So definitely got support and love from one, Donald Trump, and others. Matt Gaetz was rooting for him, right? Matt Gaetz said that this guy is what MAGA needed in the House of Representatives. And of course, Kevin McCarthy wasn't a true MAGA believer, right? Now, this guy's got no, man, I mean, I don't know if he's got any legislative victories under his belt. I have to look and find out if he's even authored any legislative bills. I don't even know that. There's not much that we know about this particular guy, but we're going to find out. We're going to find out. And he has a big test in about 2.5 weeks. Will he be able to get this CR into 2024? And the CR, of course, is short for a continued resolution. That's not a budget, right? Remember, the responsibility of the House of Representatives is to produce a budget. And we don't do that too often in the current environment. So at most we can do is produce a continuing resolution. If he can get a continuing resolution in order to get us into 2024, he's doing good. But I believe he's going to need some help from Democrats in order to do that. And I just don't see that going down well with the MAGA group in the Republican Party. If he leans on Democrats in order to get a CR across the line and avoiding a government shutdown, I guarantee you this guy's tenure as Speaker of the House will probably end sometime early during the month of December, one way or another. And here's the other thing. Think about this. On the other side of this, okay, let's assume that he only chooses to ride with Republicans' idea of I think they want to break this up into 12 different bills. They want to look at cuts in every area. If he rides with that, he's not going to have a bill that's going to jive in the Congress, in the Senate. The Senate will put together a different bill. So then we have to go to some type of conference committee, right? And then whatever comes out of that conference committee, and I just don't see Republican demands making it out of that conference committee. So if it can't make it out of the conference committee and goes back to the House for a vote, do they vote it up or down? And those moderate Republicans will have to ride with the Democrats in order to get that conference bill out of that conference CR bill out. Will that happen? That looks more likely than it does voting it down, because if you vote it down, there's no CR, and therefore there's a shutdown. And again, at the end of the day, Mike Johnson as Speaker of the House will get tarred and feathered. So that doesn't bode well for him. And again, he probably doesn't make it through the month of December as a speaker. Now, as I often say, I could be wrong, right? But I'm trying to be reasonable. I'm looking for a reasonable path that this guy can walk in order to make his presence known, in order to build a brand for himself. He's not that big of a fundraiser, right? So at the end of the day, this guy has a big hill that he needs to climb. And I just don't think MAGA is going to let him climb this hill. So that being said, boy, he is in trouble. So we'll see how it all turns out. Now, look, I tell you, I thought that this speaker's race probably would not get done until the first part of November. So I missed it really by a few days, right? I really see this CR not getting done. I don't know about you, and I'm being reasonable. I'm being reasonable because and we can really look at all the different things that they want to cut, and we can look at the rationale why they would want to cut it. I mean, the rationale that they're using as to the reason why we want to cut these programs is because we're a country that's like $34 trillion in debt. But I'm here to tell you, people, we're not $34 trillion in debt because of Social Security and because of Medicare. No, we're $34 trillion in debt because of things like TARP, because of SNL, right, that go belly up during the 1980s, because of every other bailout that we embarked on, right, in order to save mega corporations in this country. That's my opinion. And I'll be glad to argue with anybody about it because I'm being reasonable here, but I just see that there's no way that you can make all these cuts. You know what? I'll be willing to say this. Here's what I will say. I don't think you can cut Medicare and Social Security because the American people actually pay into these particular programs, right? But I can see a case where you can cut and probably get rid of Homeland Security. I can see a case where you can make the CDC a private entity. I will go out on a limb and say I can probably make a case for making the education department get rid of it completely. I could probably get along with that, get around that. I mean, I can rationalize certain things. I got to thinking the other day, Ramaswamy made a comment, I think it was at the last debate, about cutting 75% of the U.S. government's budget by getting rid of a lot of these agencies. And I got to thinking, I'm like, oh, first my first thought was that's the craziest thing I'd ever. But the more I got to thinking about it, I was like, you know what? Do we really need all this bureaucracy? Is there a better solution? And I'm a reasonable person, right? So I can say there's probably other solutions that we can make. For example, I mean, Homeland Security really is a cobbled uh, uh, a Justice Department piece, right? So where you have the CIA, you got the FBI, you got the alphabets, right? All of these guys under the guise of Homeland Security, but really it's about justice. It's about the Justice Department. So they probably should be under there. I'm not sure we need a Homeland Security. We just need a centralized group of people from the alphabets, right, to be able to pass intelligence between agencies. So everybody is on the same page as to who is an enemy of the state, whether it be foreign or domestic. I'm not sure that you need Homeland Security in order to do that. So, look, I digress. My point is this. I think there are areas where we can make some substantial cuts and to where it doesn't hurt the average or everyday American citizen, right? And I think that this guy, Mike Johnson, the current Speaker of the House, who I believe only makes it to December, I think that he has a chance to put some things on the table to get the American people to look at it and say, hey, this is what we should be doing. I think the American people just need to hear a plan. Does it solve does it solve that $34 trillion worth of debt? No, I don't think so. I think the only way you solve $34 trillion worth of debt is to continue to have GDP at 4% or higher. You're going to have to grow your way out of that debt. That's me being reasonable, folks. And guess what? We're at the end of the show. So we heard in the number 5 spot, it was Donald Trump in the state of the state of Colorado. The 14th Amendment case will go forward. In the number 4 spot, it was about the main shooter out there who ultimately committed suicide, I guess killed himself. Number 3, we asked the question whether Bidenomics is working. We still don't know, but It hasn't blown up anything yet. And of course, Trump, with all of his legal problems in Atlanta, in Florida, in Washington, in New York, you name it, this guy is, I mean, it's just like whipsaw. One way or another, this guy's in trouble. He's in trouble. And number one, Mike Johnson. What type of speaker will he turn out to be? We won't know, but we'll soon find out, especially in the next 3 weeks. So, folks, hey, this is our show. Like it, subscribe it. If we said anything that appeals to you, tell us in the comments. Tell us what you need to tell us, right? Tell us what you think we're not being reasonable or what I'm not being reasonable about. I want the controversy, right? I want to hear from you because it's important that we arrive at some solutions and some conclusions, right? Together, right? That's how this country makes it. That's how this country goes forward. It's not a problem that you have a left-leaning group here or a right-leaning group there. That's the beauty of this country, right? But we all need to be working toward that common goal. You can get opinions and consensus at both ends that works towards everyone in the middle. Hey, that's our show. My name is Art Shedd. It's Let's Be Reasonable. I hope you enjoyed the show. We'll see you next week.